Welcome out to another Trading Justice podcast. A lot of headlines out there in the market. Oil remains front and center. We're going to break down the latest, look at the technicals, talk about it from both a geopolitical, technical perspective and a fundamental perspective. Break down all of those headlines at the start of the podcast. Also had a labor report that missed pretty badly. What does that mean? We'll discuss that here. And then we're going to talk about what's on a lot of traders' minds. Is this the start of something bigger? Right? Or is this just short-term volatility? We're going to go over the ABC cycle in our feature segment. And I have a fun little geography quiz for my brother at the end of the podcast to test his knowledge uh, on a few interesting facts. So we'll end the podcast with a little levity. But the Trading Justice podcast is brought to you by Tackle Trading. And at Tackle Trading, we have a fantastic event coming up next week by my brother, in which he is going to break down what it means to be a precision trader. Matt, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about this event.
Yeah, Precision Trader next March 17th, next week, free webinar if you're interested in learning technical analysis. And this is a great environment to learn, study, get better, work on your practice, work on your skill set. And we're going to do that in Precision Trading, the art of swing trading webinar. We're going to be breaking down trends, patterns, support, resistance, talk about swing trading 101 type concepts. Going to have a lot of fun. You can hit the link in the description below and sign up for absolutely free for an amazing webinar called Precision Trading, the art of swing trading. And looking forward to teaching that next week. And can't wait to see people show up and get excited to learn how to rock this market when we find that low point.
Yeah, no, Matt, I mean, your technical skills are really cool. They are. I continue over the years to learn from you. And you don't have to wait all the week to next week. Matt's going to have a fantastic technical segment coming up here on the podcast. Uh, and break that down. But Matt, before we dive into the technicals and other things, front and center on the market, I swear 80% of the headlines I see on my news feed deal with the war, deal with oil, deal with the war, deal with the status of the war. This has become a true front and center market story, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's obviously taken up all the oxygen in the room, and earnings reports, economic reports, they all get secondary treatment. Labor market reports, inflationary reports, things that have to do with the central bank typically get all the love and all the oxygen in the market. Broadcom reported earnings last week, and it seemed like nobody even remembered who
No, nobody
Broadcom
did.
was.
Yeah.
Like it's like this is like the sixth most important company in the AI space,
Well, Matt, just look
and
at your
nobody knew.
CNBC screen right now. Four stories in the boxes, all on oil or the war. All four
Mhm.
CNBC. That's
It,
how much
it's
oxygen.
it's taking up all the oxygen in the room right now, and until crude oil settles in, and until we start to see some support battles in the ES, it's going to continue to take up all the oxygen. You can't go through. A lot of the market is mechanical, but there's a lot of emotion in the markets as well. And when you're online this weekend and you're kind of scouring for the news this weekend, what's all images all over right now? Big time bombs dropping on big time locations with big time flames and explosions. And I mean, my goodness, it was raining oil over Tehran yesterday because Israel hit one of the oil
I imagine you saw
oil
those images,
reserves.
right?
Like those images were apocalyptic
Yeah.
images. And so regardless of what the true nature of the destruction is, those images hit everybody simultaneously. We all start thinking worst case scenarios. And, it's the market, earnings, fundamental analysis, economic analysis, central banks, all of it takes a back seat to the geopolitical side of the equation. And markets that are geopolitical driven usually aren't the funnest markets, to be perfectly blunt. They can be volatile, they can be shaky. A lot of it's trying to understand where the ultimate volatility is over. And as crude oil's pumping and the VIX is pumping, that's obviously not here on a Monday. And so it's been a very interesting backdrop, the geopolitical backdrop. It's created obviously a lot of volatility, and with what the price is doing right now on the ES, we're entering into what's called market correction territory. We'll have a conversation on that during the feature segment. But yeah, it's when that story is in everybody's hearts and minds, and specifically our eyes every second of the day, the market's going to have a difficult time focusing on what's real when a geopolitical environment is creating such massive chaos right now.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. And the fundamental aspects of uh, this war as it pertains to markets, as we talked about in the podcast last week, deal with oil, right?
Mhm.
How oil impacts inflation, how it impacts the Fed, how it impacts our looking at the labor market report. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes, where bad news is good news, but it can't be, because bad news is on top of other bad news. So, dealing with,
Well,
with
bad news can only lead to good news when you can see a positive outcome at the conclusion of the bad news. That's why bad news is good news, is because the bad news forces the Fed to do something to fix that bad problem, which is usually increased liquidity in the market. And markets usually have a positive response to that. That's why bad news can be good news. But when the bad news is geopolitical that can trigger other bad news, it's hard to have a bad news is good news environment when geopoliticals are triggering more negative bad news.
No, and I love what you said there, that bad when you can't see the end of the bad news, right? And
Yeah.
that's what market, because we know markets are forward thinking, right? We've heard that a million times, and there's truth to that, right? Markets are forward thinking. But if you can't see past the bad news, and we have some clips coming up here in a few
You can't
minutes
be
that we'll,
forward thinking.
yeah, we'll have, and we got some clips from the administration coming up where they're doing their best to spin it so people can see. But Matt, when you have
The spin is
headlines,
out of this world right now
you,
going
you
on.
know, but when you have headlines, coming out of the Middle East,
Hmm.
basically the Strait of Hormuz, you have traffic basically at a standstill. Trump has tried to give guarantees of state safe passage, but the traffic there, the oil flows are minimal. And you're starting to see production shut-ins
Hmm.
in some of those Gulf producing countries, right? And this weekend we saw energy infrastructure hit, didn't we?
Hmm. Quite a bit. Well, that's what happened in Tehran to have the raining oil was you had energy infrastructure hit. Iran is hitting energy infrastructure right now, and I would say Israel and a little bit of the U.S. The U.S. less so than Israel is targeting energy infrastructure. There's an island, I forget the name of the island off the top of my head, but there's an island off the coast of Iran, southern coast, where 90% of all oil production goes through. Mark, it's not like everything is kind of around the edges unless the U.S. targets that. And if the U.S. targets that, then you could see oil expansion a ton. But it doesn't seem like the U.S. wants to target the totality of Iranian infrastructure. In fact, I heard the president and some of the president proxies come out in the last 24 hours talking about how they want to keep the infrastructure intact in Iran so that whoever does is the leader that they ultimately support that takes over the regime, which isn't the current one that just got nominated, the son of the previous Ayatollah. I don't think that's the one that the president supports, but but it seems like they want to keep the energy infrastructure intact for that next leader once they do have a deal in place. And so, yes, they are targeting infrastructure on the energy side of the equation. That's where the apocalyptic images came from when Israel bombed that one in Tehran. But in general, I would say that they're not being outlandishly aggressive targeting energy infrastructure right now. If they were, we wouldn't be seeing a sell-off behavior on a Monday on crude oil. And so the answer is yes, but there's always that one point, right, where the point of no return, okay? And the point on no return on oil and the point of no return is not some of those images we saw over the weekend. The point of no return is what happens with that island in the straits. And if that island, and again, I'm so sorry for forgetting the name off the
Is
top of
it
my head.
Keshem?
No, it's something else, but it's a small island that 90% of the oil was for we
I,
find out
this is
through
why I
Iran.
have a geography
Well,
quiz for you at the end of the
well,
show.
while I'm talking, please figure out the name of that island if you don't mind. But in terms of that, unless they target that, and I don't think they target with missiles and bombs, and I think they target it from a takeover perspective. And that could be legitimately boots on the ground and a navy surrounding it and so on and so forth.
It's
And so
Karg Island.
yes, that's the island. Thank you very much. Unless that is part of the strategic plan, I don't see what's happening right now as a massive, sustainable, elevated impact on oil.
This is an excellent point because, about 85 to 95% of Iran's crude oil exports are loaded there onto tankers. So
Yeah,
this is like you can hit something in the Iran main territory, but the island itself, and this is an excellent point on
if you don't,
escalation.
if the U.S. and I think the U.S. has told Israel, do not target that island. I think they are planning, and again, this is just my reading of the tea leaves here, but I do believe they're planning some degree of military intervention around that island, whether it's boots on the ground or just an embargo. I don't know, but that's what they want to control, and that's the bargaining chip. They can go to that next leader and say, "You want that oil?" Because Iran's only export is oil. You want that oil? You want the viability of rebuilding your country? We have the island. Here you go. So, to answer the question, I know this was a long winded way of answering the question, but to answer the specific question, are they targeting energy infrastructure? On the edges, they are. On the edges, they are. Same thing with Iran. On the edges, they are. But I wouldn't call it a like, full scale targeting initiative by Israel or America. And I don't think we've seen that out of Iran yet either. And so if we start talking about that island a little bit more, that could be very, very sensitive.
Yeah, excellent analysis, and one of those things to keep monitoring on the headlines. The normal flow of disruption because of the Strait of Hormuz and oil production shut-ins, that's going to weigh on the market. But
Mhm.
as you just pointed out with great analysis, man, seriously, that the headlines on other energy infrastructure, unless you see something happen with Karg Island, uh,
And
you
don't
know,
get me wrong, Chucky, seeing those other, man, that one Iranian not Iranian, but Israeli missile strike that hit the oil supply depot. That was like the explosion was like a nuke to a certain extent. It was massive, apocalyptic. I mean, we're literally talking about raining oil on Tehran, a humanitarian crisis, quite frankly. But even though those scenes are apocalyptic, that the supply demand side of the equation coming through that island is, in my opinion, the epicenter of whether we truly see escalation or whether we're just seeing some horrific images of a war.
Yeah, no, and the rhetoric itself, right? Those images are graphic. The rhetoric itself hasn't cooled down. We've seen Trump in recent days say there won't be a ceasefire until there's unconditional surrender. He's also said that
And
high.
he defined unconditional surrender as whatever he defines it as,
Well,
too.
yes,
So,
maybe not.
so
And then he says
listen,
higher.
when he said unconditionals, I don't think we can just move on from that.
Okay,
When he said unconditional surrender, everybody in the world went to the historical comparison of the last time that this has occurred. The last time, in fact, Mark, when was the last time somebody unconditionally surrendered in a war
oh,
with
you're
America?
quizzing me. I believe it was World War II.
It was World War II with Japan.
Yeah.
It was World War II with Japan. We've fought a lot of wars since then. We have not seen unconditional surrender, Chucky. And so, like, when he said those two words, everybody got like escalation, 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 escalation. But kind of like sometimes the president's thoughts on some of these things are kind of like a VWAP. It's individual to the conversation. It's individual to that specific day, to that specific moment. Because a day later, he was asked to clarify what unconditional surrender meant, since everybody in the world thought unconditional surrender is Iran literally laying down everything same way Japan did in 1945. Well, the president came out later on and clarified those comments to me to basically say, well, unconditional surrender is whatever I defined it as. We have a leader that I support that likes me. That's unconditional surrender. So if Iran elects a leader that likes President Trump, that might fit the definition of unconditional surrender. So it's not the same as what everybody assumed unconditional surrender meant. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to
and
clarify
and
that.
and they elected a new Ayatollah. No, I don't think he fits President Trump's box of liking him. The new Iran's new supreme leader, and I
Yeah.
apologize if I get the name wrong.
I
Mojtaba
think you can just say Ayatollah Khomeini.
Ayatollah Khamenei.
Junior. We'll just call him Junior.
So, 1979, we disposed of a monarchy to institute a monarchy many, many decades.
And we did it again. That's fantastic.
You know,
By the way, we fought a war in Afghanistan against the Taliban for 20 years just to secede Afghanistan to the Taliban. At least we're getting more effective and efficient here. It only took us 2 weeks to bring in a new Ayatollah.
but the rhetoric on both sides, has not calmed down.
Oh.
Signaling length and sustainability on the American side, and on the Iranian side, the same. The new supreme leader. Do you have any take on the new supreme leader? He seems like a very hard line, just like his father. Before.
When I was a young lad in college studying political science, geopolitics, history, all of that, we were debating the war in Iraq one time, this back in the late 90s. And we were debating the initial war in Iraq, not the second war in Iraq, where George Bush Sr., his war in Iraq, we were debating. And there was a moment in the time where George H.W. Bush had a decision to make. Does he go in Iraq and take over and remove Saddam and put in a new leader, regime change? And there was a deal with the Kurds to basically help achieve this. This has happened multiple times, by the way, but this one was back in 91, 92. And we were debating it with this geopolitical professor out of Utah. And I remember making a statement because I was making an argument that we should have finished the job, right? If we're going to commit to something, finish the job. That's the argument I was making, and which was the ouster of Saddam Hussein and to, put in a puppet that supported American geopolitical philosophy. And so I was making that argument, and he looks at me, and I'll remember this guy's a very, very intelligent, educated, been around the block a time or two, has traveled the world, studied Middle Eastern politics for as long as I can remember. I had a lot of respect for this professor, and he says, "But Matt, the devil you don't know might be worse than the devil you do."
Hmm.
And that always stood out to me. And so when we come into these regime change type wars, we always have the best intentions and we're always thinking about the best you know overall impact. But the devil we don't know could be worse than the devil that we do. And the only thing we really know right now in this regime change is the person that's now taking over the regime. It took us 2 weeks to have regime change here just to give it to Junior. And from all intention, it does seem like he's as hard lined, if not even harder lined, than Senior was. And so, like, is like even Trump said today, I don't know if that guy's long term for the job. So I don't know if that guy's long term for the job or not. I don't know that. They're trying the Venezuela, model and seeing if they can work with one of the hardliners. And, this is not about democracy expansion. Trump has already, put that one to bed. But what do we know about the guy? We know he's as hard as Senior, and we know he's digging his feet in, and we do know that there's some religious radicalism at play here as well. That is not exactly logic 2 plus 2. So it does seem like the current regime on the new guys as hard as the previous one. So I'm not sure anything has really changed on that front yet.
Yeah, no, and just there's been nothing to indicate that this is going to be brief, right?
No, no, no. Everything right now seems escalatory. Everything seems open-ended on time frames, 2 days to 2 years type scenarios. I don't know if it's, stop me if you've heard this before. I don't know if it's 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years. And you might say, well, that sounds like something Pete Hegseth said recently. And I'd say, no, that's what Donald Rumsfeld said the last time in 2003 when we were debating the Iraqi war. I don't know. He made the statement, quote, I don't know. It's a video that's been going around Twitter all week long. I don't know. 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years. I don't know. You can't put a time frame to war. And so everybody's trying to figure out that ultimate time frame to war. But there is some truth to the I don't know. 2 days,
Yeah.
there is some truth to that. What we know this very second is as we are seeing escalation, not de-escalation. But in the back of my mind, I don't think President Trump was signing up for a 6 month war when he agreed to bomb Iran 2 weeks ago. I truly do believe the president thought he could do something similar, maybe a little bit more expansive than the 12-day war that concluded with the deal coming out of the 12-day war. And there was a lot of thought initially that that was going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And then that turned into 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 days. And now we're talking, okay, 4 to 6 weeks. And so I don't know. But in the back of my mind, I do believe there's a scenario that could play out where Trump just declares victory.
Yeah, no, and I've seen that, Matt. I've seen JP Morgan. I've seen several of the writers that I follow. That is a very conventional wisdom now at this point. And I think that's been, predicated by, basically Trump's dealing with geopolitics and tariffs over the last year. It seems,
They can call it whatever they want. They can call it taco, but America's been declaring victory and running away since Vietnam.
and so, that, and I think that's on the back, and I think that's giving, the market,
Isn't that what every country does in these scenarios,
well,
though? Like when they want something to end, they're like, just declare victory and walk away.
it
Just
seems that that is how this ends. It's just a when does it occur?
okay, a negotiated settlement with the new Ayatollah or declare victory, control the island, and walk away.
I do not believe you'll have a negotiated settlement with the new Ayatollah.
I don't either.
Yeah, I
I don't
believe,
either.
everything I've read that is that out of those scenarios, do something else and declare victory, right?
Well, there was something the president said over the weekend that really stood out to me when he was talking about the outcomes of this war, and because that goes to the timing of how long we're going to be dealing with this in the market, right? And he said something really interesting. He was like, and it was kind of just like an inner thought to a certain extent. You know how the president kind of just, I kind of have that same thing. I get a thought in my head, I just say it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So the president was asked a question, and he was just kind of having this little inner thought moment. And he's like, well, if we don't do this, then we're just going to have to come back in 5 years. And that kind of seems like one of those outcomes that he's been thinking about is, all right, we do this, we've knocked out energy, no, excuse me, we've knocked down the objective of controlling the nuclear arms. Obviously, we have done a lot to to damage Iran's nuclear ambitions. Objective number two was to stop the missile threats. From what I've gathered, we've knocked out a ton of launchers. Obviously, Iran has thousands and thousands of missiles, but you still need launchers to shoot those missiles, and that's been targeted very well. So their missile capability that they've held over like a sledgehammer over the Middle East for decades seems to be deteriorating a little bit. Obviously, these things can be rebuilt, but if your objective was to put a stop on the nuclear program and to, stop that missile overhang, and you've done some pretty good work on that side of the equation. If the objective is regime change and control of the oil, this thing's going to escalate.
Yeah.
So can the president declare victory on the nuclear side? Most likely. Can he declare victory on controlling some of the missiles? Absolutely. But like if that ultimate victory is a regime change that equates to working with America, similar to how Iraq does and Saud does and Qatar does and the UAE does and all of this, we're not there, not even remotely close. Are we there?
Yeah, no, and that's where the markets are grappling with the how long does this last? What are the scenarios for a de-escalation? And I think it's widely accepted that this regime change is part of the goal here.
Well, yeah,
It
but again, I think you're also starting to see some difficulties with that because I said this a week ago and I'll maintain it today. I don't believe you're getting regime change unless you get boots on the ground.
Yeah, well said. And this isn't
And
stopping.
I also
Oh,
don't think the president wants to put boots on the ground right now.
and that will lead to the what will mission
Why it will
accomplished
lead
look like?
to the president declaring victory on the
Exactly.
nuclear and the missiles and putting an embargo and handling it through the political realm. Like I don't
And it's
think it's
just
in
and
days, more weeks, but I do think that's an outcome here.
Yeah. And the administration have a couple clips to play. The administration is out there in full force attempting to and to go back to what you said earlier, to try to see the end of the bad, right? That we're
Mhm.
in control, that that we're starting to it's basically their political spin. And we'll discuss the messaging here in a second. But the first one is by Secretary Wright, Energy Secretary Wright, talking about oil flows, to calm the markets.
Flowing through the straits before too long. And I may break a little news here, but one large tanker has already gone through the straits with no issues at all. So, as the general just described, we're massively attriting their ability to strike with missiles and drones, and that rate of attrition will increase in the coming days. So we'll be cautious, we'll be careful, but energy will flow soon. It's one of the reasons the president had to move on this war. Iran has just terrorized America.
Now, I've seen this, Matt, in several different energy will flow soon. From a market reality perspective, energy is not flowing now, right? But it's this
Oh,
attempt at
we know exactly what they were doing. They were trying to talk down the futures response
they
yesterday.
were.
That's the only thing that Secretary Wright was doing here was trying to talk down the concern of what was going to happen yesterday on oil. They're in front of this, obviously. But that's how I saw that comment yesterday. I remember watching a lot of those Sunday talk shows yesterday, and that's what I felt was like they knew the market was going to be sensitive on the futures open. I think this was a targeted message.
The next one's from Pete Hegseth on 60 Minutes last night. I play that one and we will discuss.
Well, President said this week the Strait of Hormuz will be taken care of. How will that be taken care of, and how will the ships that are there, that are not moving, start to move and be moving with a degree of confidence that they will not be inhibited by what remains of the Iranian either boats or gun emplacements along that strait?
Well, we're taking care of a lot of that.
How?
Well, American firepower. What was the Iranian Navy is largely no more. There'll be more boats to be sunk, for sure. So their ability to project any power in that area in a naval sense is being
diminishing.
Diminishing and will be increasingly diminished. Again, what I want your viewers to understand is this is only just the beginning. We are only just now getting over the top of the country with impunity, where now the munitions we're dropping are still precision-guided munitions. We've got unlimited supplies of them, and we'll be picking those targets and sinking those boats. But I would also remind your audience it's early. It's 6 days into this campaign, 6 days. So we're going to have a lot more options over time on critical waterways like that to ensure that we can safeguard.
Buy or sell, America's ability to restore oil flows through the straits through pure military force.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. There is a lot of oil tankers just sitting there waiting to go through. It's going to take more than just Pete Hegseth on 60 Minutes telling tankers to go through. It's going to take more, and I've seen this on Fox just today quite a bit, actually, criticizing the captains of oil tankers for refusing to go through the straits. Obviously, there's a big time risk, and these oil tankers are sizes of 4 football fields with the, with a top speed of 10 miles an hour. So they're kind of a target there. I'd be a little cautious myself if I was running one of those through the straits. But it's I read today, and this was chatter over the weekend as well, that America cannot alone protect the Straits of Hormuz in terms of all those oil tankers coming through. We don't have the capacity to run protection for every oil tanker coming through the Straits. And so over the weekend, and I believe last night, I believe today as well, the G7 are meeting to discuss certain plans to help this situation out. Do we see, England and France, for example, send naval assets down into the Gulf to help, run protection for these shipping containers going through the Straits of Hormuz? But no, I don't think you can control the straits solely from the air. There's still a lot of drones, and these drones, Mark, are cheap as hell to make for Iran, and Iran's one of the best in the world to do it. They build these drones for $20,000 to $30,000 a pop, and it takes us, dropping $1 million missiles on them just to shoot them out of the sky. It's like a 200-to-1 ratio right now. And so Iran just, sends out these drones, and if Iran starts to say, "I want to target oil containers," we don't have the manpower, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the missile supply to be able to protect every one of those containers coming through the strait. So it's not as easy as just Pete Hegseth getting up there and saying, "Oh, we have the manpower, we have this, we got control of the skies." All of those are positive on the war. Yes, I'm not trying to criticize that. But to suggest that that alone is the answer to fixing this problem on the Hormuz, no. I think the G7 understands. I think the United Nations understand that they're going to need more military assets down there to protect the straits and get those waterways opened up and get those shipping containers to flow through it, because it is going to take more than the military might. And that military might of the United States is beyond impressive, but they're the number one military in the world, number one assets in the world, and you do not mess with the United States military. They'll show you why we don't get free health care in the United States very quickly. But we don't have those assets to protect the global shipping of oil. And so it's most likely going to take a global response here. And we're starting to see a little bit of that out of England. We're seeing a little bit of that out of France. We'll see if it continues this week.
Yeah, and until it occurs, you are going to continue to see production shut-ins out of Middle
Mhm.
Eastern countries, and those are only going to
A couple
increase.
of, I think, what was it? The UAE said they were going to limit supply a little
Yeah,
bit
no,
right
yeah,
now.
and by all estimates, we're measured by days, not weeks, until you have mass shut-ins, and
Yeah.
right until you have mass shut-ins. And so, as long as there are issues in the strait, the rhetoric is nice, but it's not gonna, alleviate the oil disruption potential there. Want to get into talking technical speeds, but I would be, but before we do that, got to touch on the jobs report from last week, Matt. Once again, everything is being dwarfed by the war, and it's understandably so. But Matt, that was a huge, massive miss on jobs on Friday. What was your take on the jobs report?
Uh, I might be the only person in America not surprised by the terrible nature of the jobs report. Not surprised that we're seeing weakness in labor. I think this is going to continue to show weakness. I thought it was a terrible number. I thought it was a terrible print, and I couldn't. My initial thought, honestly, when I saw the negative 92K against a 58 expectation, and all the revisions to the previous ones were, I wonder how bad the real number is.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and we basically effectively had no job growth over the last year,
I don't think we're going to
essentially.
have job growth over the next year.
You know,
What makes anyone, and I'm truly asking this, this is not a political question. It's an environment question. With what is happening on the AI side of the equation, and without a government response to that, how is there going to be job growth in the next 12 months?
no, no, you've been
So, so let me ask the question. If you can answer that one, let me ask this. Have you seen any political response to what is happening on the AI side of the equation?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I saw Kevin has it out this weekend spinning things.
That's all I ever see is Kevin Hassett acting like Baghdad Bob on this and acting like it doesn't exist. Like, oh, this is just a minor situation. Oh, this is just a little bit of volatility we're dealing with right now. No, this is a trend that has been going on for a year. This is a trend. This isn't just something you can wipe away. We're averaging less than 16,000 jobs per month created, and we just came in under 92. And this is after a four year cycle where we were averaging over 200,000 jobs created monthly. And yes, you can pick apart that 200,000 monthly number that happened in the previous presidency. Absolutely, that data was as flawed as the current data is, in my opinion. However, kind of a different standard here. And so and as we go further into the AI universe, I see this happening more and more and more.
Yeah, no, and to come full circle, normally this type of jobs report would solicit a bad news is good news reaction in the sense that the Fed was on their hands. The Fed's going to come in, but with the oil, until you can see the end of the bad on the main story of the market, there's going to be those inflationary worries. The Fed's going to say dual mandate.
The
I saw,
labor market news was not the worst news for the market on Friday, let alone last week.
yeah. So,
So the end of the bad, you got to see the end of the bad. We don't see that yet.
all right. So I want to shift gears
Yeah.
now and get into um, the technicals of the market, and I want to do it through the ABC cycle.
Mhm.
Now, Matt, one of the things that is on mine is on every trader's mind out there is this just volatility, or is this the start of something larger, right? And not just from a macro standpoint, breaking this and that, from a good old fashioned technical standpoint. And one of the things that I've seen you teach to our pro community and excited about this podcast segment is understanding the ABC cycle gives us a technical blueprint
Mhm.
in how pullbacks and corrections and how they differ. And so really excited, been excited for days knowing that we were going to talk about this on the ABC cycle.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna do a specific I'm gonna just kind of look at this from a basic introductory perspective. If you want to learn more about it, come to Tackle. We talk about it every day in the lounge. I'm going to teach some of this in the Precision Trader webinar coming up next week. And then the week after in our monthly Master Trader edition, I'm going to teach quite a bit about this as well. So if you're interested, we're going to be talking about market corrections pretty much all month at Tackle Trading. Come join us over there. But the way I see ABC cycle, it's part of the Elliott Wave trending analysis tool. And I was telling the team in the futures market open yesterday, I'm going to get violent if I hear people criticize Elliott Wave in the future. Like it's completely misrepresented, it's completely misunderstood, and I'm kind of annoyed watching people that don't understand what Elliott Wave is all about try to nitpick it. Um, a market correction, Mark, what is it? What is a market correction in your opinion? Like how would you define that term, a market correction?
All right. So from a textbook standpoint, it's 10% correction, right?
Hmm.
How I view it is normally you get multiple support zones broke.
Okay.
Is it,
So you have pullbacks that are like 2 to 3%, correct?
yes.
And you have market corrections that are like 5 to 10%, correct?
Yeah, the specific percentage
And
isn't as
then you have
important.
bear markets that are 20% or oftentimes much more. It can be 37 like it
It
was
can
in the
be,
pandemic. It could be a lot of different ones, okay? So you have pullback structure, you have market corrections, you have bear markets.
yep.
What a market correction, in my opinion, from a technical perspective, is a short-term downtrend within the backdrop of a larger uptrend. Okay. And so it's a fractal move in the short term against a longer term technical story. So on the longer term, you have a trend that is higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. But then in the short term, you start to see what is called a correction, a short-term downtrend against the backdrop of a longer-term uptrend. And they're very normal. They happen multiple times a year, and you need to learn how to navigate these, not be scared of corrections. You should not be scared of something that happens multiple times every single year. We need to understand them so that we can learn how to navigate them. Now, a market correction, once again, is a short-term downtrend against the backdrop of a longer-term uptrend. In technical analysis, in Elliott wave theory, we call that short-term downtrend the ABC cycle. And what the ABC cycle is, when you think about Elliott wave moves in a series of waves. Motive wave up, corrective wave down, motive wave up, corrective wave down, motive wave up, corrective wave down. Well, once that structure breaks, it shifts into a short-term downtrend where you have motive wave down, corrective wave up, motive wave down, corrective wave up. And how the series works in terms of the waves, it goes 5 waves up, 3 waves down. And so the ABC cycle is that downward pressure in price to help us understand the waves within that corrective structure of the market correction. So the first wave down is what we call A. That would be A. The first correction against that downward pressure in price would be B. The third wave, which is standard in a correction, is C. After C, we usually are at that typical lower point on the chart. We go through a reversal and we rinse and repeat the market story done over time. Now, when you look at the longer term story of the market, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the weekly chart. Well, the weekly chart I've been describing for a while now as late stage trends is how I've
Yep,
been
you sure
describing.
have.
And how I've been describing it on the monthly chart was the end of the ABC cycle. And so when you look at the monthly chart, for example, you have a cycle that goes wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, wave 5. And so as the longer term comes into some degree of conclusion on wave 5, the ultimate question is, are we going to see a market correction or are we going to see some degree of continuation pattern? Well, that was debatable, in my opinion, up until last week. When the market closed underneath the base of support and officially put in a lower low on the daily chart for the first time in a while, that's the signal on that close last week that we are in a market correction. And when I was in the futures open stream with our tackle pro team yesterday, I was talking about this exact same conversation. And I said, listen, I think it's undeniable that we're in a market correction right now. I think it's undeniable that we should be cautious as bulls. On the longer term side of the equation, we should be thinking about cash flow. We should be thinking about covered calls. We should be thinking about protection. Patience is a position. On the shorter term, not a great swing trading environment. This is more of an understanding, great day trading environment. But in terms of the analysis, what is very important to understand in a market correction is, are we going through a normal market correction or are we going through a bear market? Because a market correction is just a short-term downtrend against a longer-term uptrend. A bear market is something much bigger. So let me ask you a question. As of right this very second, Chucky, would you say we're going to go through a market correction, or would you say this is the beginnings of a bear market?
I am firmly in the correction, not a bear market camp.
I am as well. As of right this second, I am firmly in the camp of a market correction. Now, why is that important? Because when you go back in time, the tariff analysis from last year, Mark, when you go back in time, that tariff analysis from last year, that is ABC cycle, Mark. That's what it is. Look at this. You see A, B, C. You see it through the structure of that ABC cycle. Once again, A, B, C. Three cycles to the downside, and then you reverse. Well, Mark, that's not too dissimilar to this correction just 6 months before that. A, B, C. But the difference in a standard market correction, like when you're looking at the last few years, this right here, this box I'm drawing on your chart that you can see right there, right here, is a market correction. But the depth of that correction is not too deep. So what's the difference in a bear market like we saw in the tariff, which was still an ABC cycle, by the way? All of these are ABC cycles, 3 waves to the downside. What's the difference? One is a bear market and one is a correction. So when I ask you a question, are you thinking bear market or are you thinking correction? They're vastly different because a bear market, you're thinking something nasty all the way to the downside. In a correction, no, it's just a patience is a position, let it play out. And Mark, to be able to assess that, why do you say right now you feel it's just a correction? Why? Because I doubt you're taking into account the same degree of technical discussion that I am in answering that question, but we both came to the same conclusion. Why do you say that?
Um, I do believe, okay, from a earnings perspective, earnings were absolutely, the bedrock. I don't believe that there's anything uh, that will change that trajectory in the
Oil
future.
at 120 will.
And I was going to make a joke about Karg Island. If I see headlines that it got attacked, I might change
Uh,
my position, right? And that's
yeah.
why I thought your analysis so early was gone. I do believe that Trump, to be frank, did not have necessarily the best of plans, and I do believe that he will achieve victory, right? And so I
Yeah.
do believe it's a short-term shock, and that he will. I am in that camp, and
Mhm.
so yes, volatility are there unknowns, but I believe the fundamental backdrop and the fact that Trump will declare victory at some point
Okay.
leads
And
to a
I agree with all
correction.
of that.
Yeah.
I agree with all of that. Okay. Everything you said, I agree with. But that did not play 1 ounce of 1 second of role in me answering the correction versus the bear market. Despite the fact that I agree with everything you said, I don't think those things play that big of a role right now until we start to see kind of it play out a little bit more. But I agree with everything you said. I'm not trying to disagree with you at all. What I'm trying to say is, from a technical perspective, there's a way to navigate this because there is no way to navigate what you just said. Would you agree?
No, it's opinion, it's conjecture,
Those
right?
are
Might be good
well,
opinion.
and they're catalyst. They're
Yeah.
catalyst events. Like the catalysts come out, price responds to the catalyst. I'm right there with you on that. We need to pay attention to those things as well, because that will obviously play a role in how this plays out. When I look historically, and that's what's important to me. When I look historically, Mark, at the depth in the first leg in the ABC cycle. Okay. So in the tariff induced ABC cycle last year, it went from 63.20 in that first leg all the way down to 57.50. You had a massive move to the downside where you didn't sniff any support, didn't sniff the 200, no patterns all the way down. Okay. So you had a massive sell-off in in the tariff. Go back a little bit more time to the 2020 environment where it was the pandemic. Well, Mark, look at this one.
This is
A,
why I love this
B,
lesson so
C,
much.
and then it reverses. And so you go back to the pandemic of 2020 and you go back to the tariffs of 2024. In both of those examples of A in the ABC cycle, you had a deep, deep sell off in A. And when you had a deep sell off in A, see, the thing about ABC and the thing about technical analysis is there's a behavioral analysis to it. And so if you have a deep sell-off in A, that sets the personality for C. Remember, in Elliott wave, how far wave one goes will determine how you see wave three. How you see wave one will help you equate to wave five. There's a behavioral element to this, and this isn't new stuff. This was stuff that was figured out 100 years ago, technically. And so when you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycle on the upside in Elliott wave, there's a behavioral element to 1, 3, and 5. When you look at the same thing on the downside, there's a behavioral element to 1 and 3. The waves down and the waves up have behavioral analysis to them. And so what sets the behavior is the depth of A within the ABC cycle. So if we see a deep A, you can expect a bear market. If you see a shallow A, you can expect a normal market correction. So the ultimate question is, as of right now, is this a shallow A or is this a deeper A? And I would argue this is a shallow A. We've really only had 2 days of expansion to the downside before you start getting into 6,600. And so how I see this, and I'm navigating at ABC, if 6,600 is the bottom point on this chart and we retrace all the way back up into 68, we're probably going through a shorter duration market correction. Whereas if the first move in A doesn't stop at 66, but it stops at 65.40 where the 50 weekly is, or if it stops at 62.50 where the principal polarity number is, those are deeper. And so if 66 is the bottom point of A, I think we're in the technical mood of a standard market correction. If we see something deeper in A, I think you need to buckle up those seatbelts a little bit tighter
Sell the
because
rip
you're
if
going
it
to see more
occurs.
volatility to the downside. Does that make sense?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, no, you did a great job breaking that down.
It's a very, very important part of the equation. You can see it play out on the daily chart over time. And obviously, I told the team in the futures market open, I told the team here today, come rain or sun, we're there at Tackle to break it down. And our job right now is to figure out where the low point in the ABC cycle is. It is not to be a hero in this condition. These conditions, patience is a position. Covered if you got them. That's a mentality we have at Tackle Trading to cover our longer term asset class to wait out the volatility. There are going to be great buying opportunities. I said this about IGV, and if I had a little bit more time in the pod to break this down, I'd do a cross comparison against IGV. But I said this exact same thing in IGV for what felt like weeks and weeks and weeks. Patience, patience, patience. Don't create liquidity. Patience, patience, patience. Now you're at the 200-day moving average. Let's see that reversal play out. And we navigated that from the fake down, breakdown, fake down to the upward movement in price, looking pretty good. And so I don't think it's too dissimilar to that conversation, but that's our job at Tackle. We're going to find the low point, and we're going to start the buying process at that point. And so if you want to navigate with the community that does that for each other, hit that link in the description, become a pro member, get into the precision trading webinar next week, and join me in Master Trader in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. The great lesson. You did a great job, just like, someone that was new or even a little advanced, to technical analysis. I think you really broke that down very, very nicely. Well done, brother.
Appreciate that.
Now, how well are you going to do on my rapid fire
How
geography
did I
quiz today?
do? How did I do last week? I think I was like 60% on your pop quiz last week.
It was 2 weeks ago on the president's game, or a couple weeks ago on the
Yeah,
president.
actually I did okay on the
You did all right on
Yeah, I
that.
did okay. I missed a couple questions I was mad at, but all right, I'm ready for your pop quiz. Play along, team. Play
All
along.
right. So one of the reasons, a lot of heavy subjects out there. I like to finish the podcast with a little levity and fun. And one of the reasons I chose a geography quiz is that when you have these geopolitical events, well, what did we do at the start of the podcast? We're like, what's the island's name? Right? Like people, they tend to Google a lot of things to understand the world they live in. So I thought I'd do you see how my brothers
Well, the thing about that is, Mark, I have been reading stories on that island all weekend long. And there I
Uh,
was off the top of my, I'm like, what is that island again?
all right, so we're gonna play along at home. So even if you know the answer, give it a couple
How many
seconds.
questions? 10?
We got 10 questions.
Okay, so to say you did great, what do you got to get? 8?
Yeah, I'm gonna say eight. Eight's solid.
Okay.
All right, first question. And I got some easy ones, got some hard ones. I'll probably ease up, but you're not gonna get this first one. I know you're not. So I'm gonna start you off on a bad mood. Then I'll give you a couple softballs. What country has the most islands?
Oh.
I had no idea. I had zero idea.
What
Country.
country, not
Which
continent, what
country, not
country?
continent.
What country has the most islands? It has to be, it's got to be in the Pacific. In the Pacific, those island regions, the Philippines, there's a
You,
billion different islands. Am I not in the zone?
you would have a better chance randomly guessing a country than using
Uh,
logic on this one.
all right. Okay. It's either or. I'm gonna do the either or. Either one, it's in the Pacific near Philippines and all that, or two, it has something to do with the Arctic. But I'm gonna go final answer, the Pacific. I'm just gonna throw it out, Philippines.
Yeah, your second one was along those lines. The answer is Sweden, if you can
Really?
believe that. Guess how many islands? Over
I don't
two
even want to guess. I won't be close.
over 260,000
Legitimate islands,
legitimate.
260,000 legitimate islands.
I had to double
I'm
source check
shocked at
that.
that. Wow. You did
Oh,
start with a hard one here. Okay.
I
0 for
did.
1.
I
0 for
did.
1 I am.
But
Okay.
it's all right. So tallest mountain in the world, brother.
Oh, Everest.
Okay, Mount Everest, right?
What,
What
what,
continent has the most countries?
okay, so we went from country to island. Now we're going continent to countries, correct?
Yeah,
That'd be Africa.
Africa with 54 countries.
I
With
couldn't tell you
54,
the number, but I did know Africa.
54 countries on that. A little bit of a harder one here. What country borders the most other countries?
What country borders the most other countries? It's either Russia or China. I think. I'm not certain. Man, Russia's big. But the map does not do it justice. And China gets all those Asian countries. I'm going to say Russia.
I made you sweat for no reason. They're tied at 14. China.
Are they really tied?
They're tied at 14. Both of
All right.
them have 14 countries
I'm
on
taking a
that.
win.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. You get. In fact, you might get double points on that. All right. What sea separates Europe and Africa?
What sea separates Europe and Africa? That would be the Mediterranean Sea.
That would be the Mediterranean Sea. What is the largest country in the world by land area?
What is the largest country in the world by land area? Largest country by land. Country. Is it Russia?
It is Russia.
Okay.
It is Russia. Yeah, that was one of those tweener one.
Yeah.
Speaking
I
of
was
size,
debating like 3 areas, but
what is the largest island in the world?
that's Greenland.
It is Greenland. That could trick somebody. Somebody say, that could trick someone.
Greenland's an island. Yes.
But not in the news as much lately. Old Greenland.
No, we got to go get Cuba first. So
Yeah, I mean, have we heard the last of Greenland
No.
from Trump?
No, we haven't heard the last of anything. No, this is going to be an ongoing saga for a couple more years there.
Okay. What country is both in Europe and Asia and has the city of Istanbul? That's kind of an easy one, but
Isn't that Turkey?
yeah, it's Turkey.
Yeah.
It's Turkey. What is the smallest country in the world?
It's in Rome. It's Vatican.
I thought that one might get you.
Oh, no,
I,
no, no. I've watched too many new Pope
I
shows.
I thought that one might get you on the not knowing that the Vatican City was technically a country,
No,
but
I definitely familiar with that small country within Rome.
all right. And then we are going to finish up. And you've already beaten the what U.S. state has the largest coastline?
I was so close just to ripping off California very quickly or Florida because Florida goes around and obviously it's either Florida, California, or Alaska.
This is correct. It's one of the three.
Um, Man, Florida's like all around, but I'm pretty sure Alaska's all around too. I'm narrowing it down to Alaska and Florida. I mean, Texas would be there a little bit too, but uh, final answer, I'm going with, I think you're trying to trick me, Alaska.
It is Alaska. It
Okay.
is Alaska. All right. I'm going to finish with a super hard one. I don't think you'll get this one, but you've already achieved your B's get
I
degrees.
was actually decent in geography back in the day. It was
You've
like,
already gotten
yeah,
your B's get
I was
degrees.
decent with that.
What country has the most natural lakes in the world?
I can't answer Minnesota.
No, it is not Minnesota. That's not a country.
Can I get a hint?
No, you've already won the game. You don't get any hints.
Is the country close to Minnesota?
I am not going to give you any hints.
Oh, I think I know, but I don't want
You
to
already
say.
got my stumper. I thought I'd get you on Vatican City. So you already got my
I,
stumper.
I'm gonna go with Canada.
It is Canada. Well done, sir. Well done, sir. And great analysis throughout the podcast, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. On the war, you gave me lots of things to think about. Your analysis on Karg Island, I think if you see headlines on Karg Island, that is going
It's
to add,
escalation.
that's going to be an escalation. Not that the oil shock's not out of it. And then the ABC thing was just stellar. So well done, brother. But send us out.
Yeah, if you love the pod, you hit that like and share. Best way to support the pod. Also leave a comment. And if you're ready to join Tackle Trading with a free membership and come hang out with us every single day as we navigate the financial world together and we put the education and application absolutely together in one nice little subscription. Hit that link in the description and join us at Tackle with that free trial. Got the Precision Trader webinar coming up next week. You can hit that link in the description as well as join me in Master Trader as well. Lots coming up at Tackle. If you need anything from us, email us at team@Tackle Trading. Join our Discord channel. With that said, I hope everybody has a wonderful and blessed week. And hopefully you enjoyed the podcast today as well.
Have a great week, everyone.